We're here again to welcome Max Talley, who was born in New York City, lives in Santa Barbara now. His writings appeared in Fiction Southeast, Volume 1 Brooklyn, Atticus Review, Entropy, Santa Fe Literary Review, and the Saturday Evening Post, among others. His 2021 story, Celestial Vagabonds, won a Best Fiction Award at Jerry Jazz Musician Journal, then was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Talley's first novel, Yesterday We Forget Tomorrow, debuted in 2014, and his crime thriller, Santa Fe Psychosis, was published by Dark Edge Press in the spring of earlier this year. He teaches a writing workshop, of course, at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. Welcome to all the Santa Barbara Writers Conferencers. And at the Santa Fe workshops. And if you need to know more about what he likes, what his sign is, what he likes to eat, go to maxdevotally.com. Please welcome Max Talley.
Thanks. It's great to see so many friends and fellow writers here. I'm very lucky to have Maryanne Knight, who's in my writing group and also a great writer. I predict she'll be speaking here in about 2 years, and I'll be trying to get a signature, and she'll be saying, "Get away from me." Anyway, she's going to ask a couple questions. We're going to read small little snippets, hopefully alluring bits of the book, and the whole thing shouldn't last more than 30 or so minutes. If you feel hot, please go outside, get some air. I'll try to bellow so that even outside I can be heard. So anyway, Maryanne Knight.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate that. As Max said, I'm a fellow writer in a writers group with him, and really thrilled to be here tonight. Very excited about this collection, My Secret Place. I'm gonna, just before we get into the actual reading, ask Mac a few questions so we can learn a little more about him as a group. Mac, you are a prolific writer of short stories. You've had a number of short stories published to date. How did you select the pieces to include in this particular volume?
That's a good question. Next, no. They were ones that I thought they were interesting characters. They all had their obsessions and they all had their sort of interesting pursuits. They were all kind of flawed, but not one or two maybe were evil, but most of them were flawed heroes. And I thought they all had something that brought them together. They were sort of superheroes of their own life. And they all had eccentric quests that they went on, whether they were musicians or artists or collectors of trivia. So I felt there was some bond between that. And so I looked for stories that kind of had that thing. And then it was also a matter of just the ones that the publisher, wanted and thought that fit together as far as a good collection.
I definitely picked up on that theme of the kind of the flawed individuals, the personal journeys, and really felt that My Secret Place. I know there's an actual story with that title, but it felt like that really did kind of characterize a lot of the stories in this book. So I really enjoyed that. Now you've also published a couple of novels in addition to this. What for you is the difference in writing a collection of stories versus a novel?
So writing a novel is sort of like being lost in the desert. You don't really know, am I going to make it across the desert? Will there be water? What am I doing here? And short stories, it's just sort of like a weekend trip. You go out, you complete your work, you come back, you get food, you get rest, and then you go back into the battle. With a novel, you feel like you're just sort of marooned out there, and you never know, am I finishing the novel? Is the novel finishing me? And so I feel it's easier in a way to do a collection of short stories because you can feel an accomplishment. Okay, I got this done in a month, and I got this. A book could take you 6 months, or maybe 3 months if you're Shelley Lowenkoff, but it also could take you 6 years. And could stretch on and on. I feel with short stories they're more finite, you can sort of control them. And there's so little control in life. As writers, we want to be control freaks.
Yes, we did.
And so that's, to me, the difference. The novel can make a grand statement, but I think short stories can make nice little statements, little slivers of people's lives.
Very good. Thank you. So in addition to your literary fiction, which I would characterize this as predominantly literary,
That's true.
and you also write in a variety of genres. So you've written speculative fiction, you've written mysteries, you write essays, and there's doses of humor in most of your work. In fact, it's rare to find something that doesn't have at least a funny line in it or two, right? So is there a style or genre that you prefer more than the others, and what about that appeals to you?
That's a tough one. I like writing anything that has some humor in it and anything that's a little bit weird. But I think you can write literary fiction that's on this planet that's a little bit weird. You can write stuff that's science fiction and it's very literary.
Mm-hmm.
You can write, if there's a bit of something surreal or something mysterious, I like that. So even if it's just a complete story on Earth and it's normal people, I want people to wonder, why are they acting like this? Why are they being so bizarre?
Mm-hmm.
So I like stuff that has a strange tinge to it and also some humor in it there too.
Mm-hmm. Very good. All right, the last question. Frederick Dorn is a character who makes an appearance in a couple of these stories. He's kind of a side character. He's not the main character in the story, but he's there. So does that mean, can we expect to see more of him and this world that you've created in which he lives?
I'll try to keep this brief since we have to get to readings, but in 2014 I wrote a book about 5 characters. It was 125,000 words. As you can imagine, nobody wanted to publish it. However, chapters from that have over and over gotten published. So I published at least 6 chapters as standalone stories.
Mm-hmm.
So these characters from them are suddenly haunting all my other work. So I write a different story and then there's a character from this other book. So yes, Frederick Dorn will be in a future crime novel. It's going to be a hippie crime novel taking place in 1969 where he's a hippie detective in Haight-Ashbury. And then you'll have all the Frederick Dorn you ever wanted to watch.
All right, well, thank you. And on that note, let's turn this over to reading. Do you want me to introduce how we're going to read it? Or do you want me to...
I'm going to read a piece, then Maryanne's going to read a piece, and then I'm going to just close it with a tiny little piece of humor at the end. So, this is a small section from the second story, Up from the Sky. If you can't hear, let me know. If you can hear too much, let me know, and I'll tone it down. Krish Dar scrunched into his window seat on the cramped Air Canada jet. His business required travel from Southern California to Phoenix several times a year. The return flight took roughly 75 minutes, a good chance to stare into space and mull over things. Krish watched intriguing women enter the plane and manage the slim passageway, a brief juncture of hope. For whatever reason, they were never ticketed next to him. No, he consistently endured giant, long-legged fellows as neighbors, or sweaty, glandular men who needed the auxiliary seatbelt strap to secure them from careening about the cabin. If a woman ever sat next to Krish, it was a besieged mother wrestling with a mewling infant who smelled of soiled diapers and Gerber's drool. As expected, this October day, an expansive man took the adjoining seat. Howdy! He immediately spread into Krish's private area. Rules of travel were unspoken but clear. The armrest that separated 2 people into their tiny seats signaled the boundary line that extended invisibly down to the ground. Not only did the passenger let his pale, hairy legs sprouting from khaki shorts extend over the divide, but he laid a doughy arm flat onto the armrest, hand dangling toward Krish, one jolt of turbulence away from palming his crotch. You're not a you-know, are you? The neighbor asked. I mean, these days I like to know who I'm flying with. These days it's 2019, not... Yeah, but still. My father is from India, Krish said, but no, I'm not religious at all. The man's mouth curled. I love chicken curry, you know? He leaned closer. What'd you say your name was? I didn't, but it's Krish. He gazed out his window, hoping the conversation had run its course. Chris, that's an American name. I am American, but it's Krish. Like that religious cult? The man laughed, pushing the hair atop his forehead back over the pink scalp behind. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, he sang. You married? Yes. Arranged? No, I was born here, not India. My mother's from Florida. Just so you know, I voted for Obama twice. He beamed. I'm Fred. Since we got an hour to kill, what's your story? Krish felt claustrophobic, his body pressed uncomfortably against the jet's curved wall. I just came back from a family funeral. I'm getting downsized and my wife wants a divorce. Seriously? I'd rather not talk or I might cry. Krish knew that even if neighbor Fred didn't swallow his lies, a man could not watch another male stranger weep without becoming uneasy and eventually switching seats. Krish hoisted the plastic shade on his window. The vast expanse of nothingness west of Phoenix spread out below him. Hollywood movies featured the barren geography of Arizona to depict Mars, or any uninhabitable desert planet. Decades ago, they used Utah, like in Planet of the Apes. But viewers had grown more sophisticated, recognized the signature buttes from Western films and car commercials. Occasionally, Krish saw a silver glimmer, the outline of a house plunked down far from civilization, miles from a paved road, the slight imprint of a dirt tread visible. Setting up a residence in a moonscape with the temperature of a blast furnace was really getting off the grid. The inhabitants never considered the distance to a Trader Joe's or a supermarket, their essential concerns being water, power, and staving off the heat. An absence of green below, nothing growing, no moisture, no shade. Krish couldn't imagine people receiving cable television. And streaming? From where? What internet provider would cater to the descendants of old silver and uranium prospectors? Can you see the Grand Canyon, fella? Fred craned his basketball-sized head over near Krish and squinted. No, that's a good 200 miles north. Geez, you're smart. That's why you're getting all our jobs. Fred nodded, smirking. What's your line, anyway? I designed targeting mechanisms for rockets and missiles. Krish couldn't reveal much. How about you? Waste management. Fred stared at Krish. Every time you see a portable toilet outside a construction site, that's me. Below the mountains, sprouted in jagged ranges that resembled spines of gigantic reptiles. Dinosaurs flung from distant planets then crashed down on Earth as flaming meteors, leaving their burned husks impacted into the shallow ponds of sand. Now they floated charred fossils in the desert ocean, a desert which had once been an ocean too long ago to think about. The rucked, desolate moonscape reminded Krish of his job, guidance systems for weapons of destruction and of atomic bomb tests in the Southwest during the 1940s and 50s. Fred continued jabbering. Take a plane, go to a concert, attend an outdoor fair, and eat some funky casserole, and you'll thank God for the invention of chemical toilets. Krish pictured the residents of the scattered tiny houses as artists who slept through the days of soul-crushing heat, then rose at sunset to build giant sculptures of dragonflies or float like vehicles to parade at Burning Man. Or they wrote stream-of-consciousness novels, plucked from the depths of their fevered dreams. Perhaps they composed orchestral overtures to be performed in canyons using nature's elements as their instruments. When those fantasies died away, Krish felt saddened to think that maybe they were just ignorant. People who spent their days sweating and staring at the walls, retired not only from work, but from inner consciousness altogether. Folks who roused from their damp stupors at nightfall to find sustenance in food for pleasuring themselves without reason, beyond filling the long, slow hours of nothingness. If you meet an attractive lady, marry her right away, Fred said. Don't live with them first. We want mystery, not all the details and flaws. Did that help you? Not in the first two, but I'm hoping the third time's the charm, Fred replied. Krish felt the child kicking his seat back and tried to meditate. This too will pass. Would you like a beverage? Flight attendant asked them both. Bloody Mary, Fred announced. Thank you, Marcy. She smiled when their hands accidentally touched, and Fred guzzled the drink down the moment the plastic cup reached his grip. Just water, no ice, Krish said. It's room temperature, she frowned. Warm water. That's good for digestion. Really? Have some pretzels. Marcy tossed a generic airline package onto his tray table. I do not want pretzels. Krish handed them back. Why not? They're free, she said. Gratis, no charge. What's wrong with you, Krishna? Fred asked, rousing. Listen to the pretty lady. I don't like pretzels, okay? Then have an American Airlines chocolate biscotti, Marcy said. No one refuses these. Please, no. Both Fred and the attendant studied him for a strained moment, then continued with their flight flirtation. Saw us playing golf in Palm Springs and got me a double bogey. My ex played golf until the second heart attack. Marcy eyed Fred, appraising him. Phoenix? That heat there can be murder. Fred asked for another Bloody Mary and handed her his business card. She grinned. Marcy had dark wavy hair with auburn highlights, painted doll pretty. Krish couldn't imagine what lay beneath the red lipstick, eyebrows, long fake eyelashes, foundation and blush, or without her hair dye, whether she had features at all. He did guess she was pushing 40, while Fred, for all his failings, looked the marriage type. Maybe Marcy had calculated a transactional relationship, sex twice a year on Christmas and his birthday, in exchange for a house, a shared reality, the vague sense of belonging to something, to being shrouded in societal normalcy. Riding cramped jets with recycled air held only claustrophobia and dehydration for her future. Krish dozed off after drinking his water, but woke to his neighbor's voice. My umbrella, Ella, Ella. The cretin wore earbuds connected to a device and sang along with Rihanna. Fred's arm lay crooked on the armrest, so his elbow jabbed into Krish's ribcage. He didn't want to lose his temper. The flight would be over in 30 minutes. The annoying fool to be forgotten like a morning piss. Krish had learned from an ex-girlfriend that in times of stress, Buddhist chanting would calm him and slow an accelerated heartbeat. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, he repeated with his eyes closed. When Krish finally opened his eyes, Fred had recoiled away in his seat, and Marcy, the attendant, loomed above with a stern expression. Sir, she said, you're making the passengers very nervous with your Muslim chanting. If you could just stop until we land and you reach your mosque, that would be great. It's not Arabic, that's Buddhist. You believe in Buddha? Fred asked. As a man, yes, Krish replied. He's not like your Santa Claus. Marcy looked offended. We don't chant or pray on planes in America, Fred said, unless it's going down. Another passenger across the aisle became agitated. What? She said, hand to ear. The plane is not going down, Fred said. Just telling Hare Krishna here to stop freaking us all out. His voice slurred and his meaty right thigh rubbed against Krish's leg. Anyway, to hear more of that romance, that's the second story. And now Maryanne has been nice enough to volunteer to read Reeled In.
Okay, I get to read the whole thing, though, right?
Yes, of course.
This one's not so funny. This one's actually, I think, a very beautiful story. Reeled In. I saw you then, in the summer, from the promenade of that county fair, as you lay on your back in the near grass, and I wandered with girlfriends I barely knew. The late low sun dazzled your tangle of blonde hair, and a mustache made you look older, closer to 28, which was good. Demigods of a lesser mythology, callow and vain, ignorant and cruel. Aware of our powers, but not mindful of how fast they might fade, with the sunset, with the summer. You seemed a prince in exile, yet the center of attention, and I felt something, perhaps not love, but a desire or demand. I wanted one of you. I'd thrown away yesterday's university boys and wanted tomorrow's man. I was of the moment, at my zenith, and therefore entitled to have you. Our beach tans cast us in bronze, a photo aging of the sun's revenge decades away, and I reeled you in as I could do. For the initial catch is easy. It's only the keeping that requires a sustained spell beyond pheromonal witchcraft and anguished concentration. You might have made eye contact and advanced toward me, even had I been another, more conventional, less exotic. Hey babe, what's happening? Never seen you before. You deserted your coterie of male friends and the random women lingering nearby, trying not to look too hungry. I wore light blue eyeshadow, knock-me-down pumps, and a halter top. Together, we were fashioned of mirror sunglasses, pastel colors, and faded jeans, carrying Salem menthols and looking for beers, and somebody had a joint, so no reason to hassle about all that. Be patient. Bliss will arrive. My girlfriends retreated in whispers, beach grass in the wind, while your sports car guys were still sprawled langorously on the green, waiting for the electricity of night to animate them. Aware of the magic, our magic, they nodded their heads, almost bobbing in a rhythm of agreeance, spellbound. The whole scene played out as if predestined, the magnetic pull of moon and tides bringing us together as shadows extended and a slight breeze kissed our hair. The wind couldn't chill the long day's warmth baked into the ground. Then we walked, laughing about things that may not have been funny, but were because we chose them to be. The Ferris wheel looks crazy. Yeah, I know. So many lights. Smiling when words fail, baring teeth in an ancient mating ritual. The sunlight came in slivers and shards, the sky still pale blue, and only the children we passed had confusion worrying their faces. Where's Mom and Dad? When do we eat? And perhaps dinner could be improvised somewhere down the road, at IHOP or Friendly's or Howard Johnson's, ordered off laminated menus while parental restrictions wavered from the exhaustion of an eternal day that stretched right past 8 at night. As ice cream and milkshakes melted over young mouths and spilled over their clothes in messy nocturnal joy, and at the very feeling of being alive. Because of summer. Not much of anything to do or not do, nowhere to get to in a hurry or stay at for any given time. Deadlines and curfews, the restraints that harness the world most of the year, becoming vague, almost intangible near the solstice. The cotton candy and popcorn we gathered were discarded along our trajectory through makeshift avenues created by rows of carnival games, booths, and food stands. Check out all this stuff. You spoke using simple phrases, and during those beginnings, we imagined more interesting people hidden in the shy silences. The fairway grass lay flat, trampled beneath our feet, a faint tang of manure wafting from distant pony rides, and carny voices hawking for our attention but receiving none. I brought you in close and nuzzled your neck, and pressed my breasts against you casual-like when it's never casual-like, after we shared a forgotten Schaefer beer plucked from melted ice water in a cooler. We fell into one another when the sun came down to greet us, glowing orange like live coals nestled in the high branches behind a wall of trees to the west. The whole slender Long Island of Long Island stretched out before us. Potato fields and manicured gardens, orchards and tangles of brush. Mountains impossible, the flat topography mapped by houses and lanes, by the open meadow just beyond us, with a lone horse whinnying in a paddock. In the finality of night, we searched for a bar or club on a jetty, the slap of bay waves against dock pilings, where a band might play a favorite summer song, or we could find a jukebox that never quieted. Only the urge to be orphaned from our families, a constant. Indifferent to politics and churning foreign wars that could barely grip us, the greater world remained a rumor we chose to ignore. And later we undressed, if not that evening, then soon after and time again. No details linger, but it doesn't matter if it was fantastic or drunken or fumbling and apologetic or wild and animalistic. We looked good together, and when we walked nestled in a symbiotic form, people watched us, not so much in jealousy, but in understanding that such was the way of the world, and to hate this thing, to hate us, would only expose their thorny, embittered souls. For that was the reason to live while young, applaud it as it passes by, pay respect, and then seek it for yourself, or go cradle a memory of when it once burned inside, relentless. We were bonded forever and ever, and our forever lasted through August. I came from the city, you were local. Bonikers, they called you. You skippered boats, day fishing trips where you reeled in the big one for clients. In the lazy, recumbent hours you confided, I want to sail the coast with you, clear down to South America and then across Cape Horn. We would somehow end up, eventually, miraculously, in the Mediterranean, beyond our struggles, and relaxed in a facsimile of love that had traveled stormy and arrived intact. It would all occur the following June, after my senior year ended, and you made more money. And it was as good a plan as any hatched in youthful passion, and might have even happened. But graduation took me to Europe, and I never returned to Long Island, and you never wrote or called me. Perhaps someone else joined you on our delirious, insane voyage. I rose today throbbing with this memory, a fever dream that submerges the sleeper, then throws them back onto land, startled and uncertain in a reality that appears strange after being so deeply immersed. To navigate a marriage not sparked by electricity, but comforted by the sameness, the lasting quality of long-time possessions when so much that's transient falls away in life. We choose the things of worth that ground us, to remind us who we are, not who we were. It's a selection process, and the autumn of life brings different choices than during those prolonged sunsets of our brazen youth.
Thank you. Great reading.
Nice.
I'm just going to finish off with this very short piece because I know it's boring to hear people read forever. A lot of you are writers here. Anyone who's a writer, a songwriter, script writer, artist, musician, sends their work out in the world and occasionally gets rejections. In my case, hundreds of rejections. I would say hundreds and hundreds, but that adds up to another word that I don't want to say. When you get 1,000, it's A lot of hundreds. So anyway, I took my favorite phrases from various rejection letters, put them together into this piece, only had to tweak it a little bit, and came up with this. Dear writer, thank you for entrusting Hooligan Review with your work. Few trust us with anything. We enjoyed this piece thoroughly, but after careful consideration, we could not fit it into our current issue. We tried, with smaller fonts, slender margins, and even a shoehorn. The damn thing would not squeeze in. Our editors read your story several times, as we often do with work we plan to reject, and found much to admire, primarily the indents and space breaks. Masterful. Your piece reminded us of stories we published years ago when people called us fearless, before the desperation for endowment grants and ultra-sensitivity dictated our choices. Some of our staff raved about your writing. However, they no longer work here. We love your voice, but this is not a podcast. Still, we think you may have a future in broadcast radio. Please don't give up, at least not right away. Journals like ours depend on your submission fees. Someone has to win the lottery, right? These matters are subjective. We know nothing, less than nothing. Sure, we have MFAs up the yin-yang, but we're working at a freaking lit journal, not being awarded the Pulitzer Prize. And remember, we're all writers too. Really, really desperate writers. There are measures we take to keep our selection process just. To ensure fairness, we utilize a blind submission policy. Our first readers are literally blind. They don't know who you are, we don't know who they are, and we aim to keep it that way. Totally random. They just pick by guessing, and do you really think anyone in the publishing industry acts differently? Although you didn't make the long list, or the short list, or the final cut, we would like to offer a 5% discount on our $80 annual subscription rate, so that you can read all the excellent stories we accepted not written by you. Since you may be wondering amid these compliments what exactly we didn't like, one of our editors was offended by your use of the word homeless, even though you were clearly referring to your own current status as a broke writer. As you may know, that term is on NPR's list of banned words. Being a lit journal attached to a university, it's essential that we remain woke at all times, even when literally asleep. Another editor counted 5 adverbs in your story. Someone at some writers' conference somewhere once said, kill your darlings, kill your adverbs, kill your family members, just before they were carried off and institutionalized. It pains us to admit that a small cabal of similar know-it-alls runs the literary world. So now every writer must use a spare style like Hemingway or Raymond Carver, but without the white male part. In closing, though there is much to admire in your work, we can't use your piece at this time. During other times, like the Renaissance, the Industrial Age, or the Cold War, we would have been fighting, literally begging to print your damn story. We wish you the best of luck finding a home for your writing elsewhere, in a galaxy far, far away. Feel free to submit to Hooligan Review again in our $15 expedited rejection category. Why wait 6 months for the bad news and letters like this? Cheers, Hooligan editors. Thanks, everybody. I just want to thank Chaucer's Books. These guys have been here forever. Our friend to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. I've known Mike. You've probably been at the conference longer than I have. My first one was 2005. When was yours?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. And Chaucer's has always been there, had a table there, so I've known him. I've known Devora, Dee, probably for 10 years, and Scott, who does the consignments here, is also, everyone who works here loves books, actually reads them, which is very important, so it's great to do my signing here.
Yay.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Does anybody have any questions for Max? Well, talk about the cover, and you do your own art. It's wonderful stuff.
When I'm allowed to, or when budget constraints come in, sometimes they allow me to do art for my own covers. So I basically created this for one of the stories, My Secret Place, but it sort of had to do with a couple of the characters. They're inside their own little private room with their wine and their joint and their antidepressant pills, but they still have eyes looking in on them. They're still haunted by purple ghosts. So even if you have your secret place, your private writing room, you can't really escape the specters in the mind.
Did that particular piece inspire the story, or was it vice versa?
It was vice versa. So there was the story. Once in a while, it's the other way around, and I'll do a painting and then say this would make a good story. But usually, it's a thing where, in this case, where this was picked up by the publisher, and I thought I've seen some of the things they do at publishers, small publishers, and I didn't want to risk. I wanted to at least have the option to give them my vision. They don't always take it. You have no power with it. But I was lucky in this case.
So they're very receptive in taking the.
This time, there was the Santa Fe Psychosis. They liked a painting I did, and then said, well, we can't print it. We're having problems printing your art on the cover. Which either was a way of saying we don't want to do this, or we have no idea what we're doing, because it's pretty hard not to print, you know, a JPEG or a TIFF file onto a print cover. So they chose their own image, and that's, you sort of have to expect that. As a writer, you have very little, unless you're someone like Stephen King. He can probably have whatever he wants on there, but even mid-range and fairly famous writers have to go along with the publisher.
I think it's really rare that you're fortunate to be able to have that control, because, like as you said, a lot of writers don't have control even over the title of their own work.
True.
And
I can speak to that. My dad's been in publishing forever, and he would accept people's books and immediately change the title. And so you have to accept that also. So I was lucky in the sense that this is a smaller publisher, so maybe they didn't have time to do that, but at a bigger publisher, yes, people come in, they think way too much about the cover, the title, and they bring in a department, and people are consulting, and sensitivity readers, you got everyone arguing. So, and that's one luxury of being at a smaller publisher, is that you're dealing with one big editor or two, not a whole team of people around a table.
as far as what you put in there and what you left out, how did you choose? Because I'm sure you have hundreds of stories that could probably fit in there.
I knew that it had to be around 200 pages, and this in this case about 170 pages the way they formatted it, but it could have been 200 pages, so they wanted it about that length. So yeah, I have tons of stories, and hopefully there will be future collections. I certainly have ones out there that I've submitted to different publishers. So I hope to eventually have a bunch of collections.
The ones that didn't make it, was there one that you really wanted in there but it just didn't fit, or?
In this case, not so much. There have been times when your favorite story is the one that they hate. And you just sort of say, do I want to be published, or do I want to hang on to my pride? And pride goes pretty fast. But this was a case where he liked the stories, and this same publisher I think I submitted to 4 years ago and rejected me. So obviously he looked at the stories, or he just got tired of me submitting and just said, okay, let this guy go. Do you ever have that?
Yes. In terms of revision, in let's say a typical short story of yours, would you revise it? Like how many revisions or drafts would you go through before you got it to the level where you felt it was
A lot. I think I'll write it for a week, then there'll be another week where I revise it and I think, wow, this is pretty good. Then I take it to my writers group, and my friends like Maryanne and Angela see it, and they're like, what? And then I see it in a whole new light when you read it to other people, and you're like, how could I have done that? So then there's that process. It's very nice if the story is completely done in a month. And I don't mean a month of constantly going over it. A week of writing it, and then you occasionally take a look at it. Then you let it rest a while. But so different stories have a different amount. Some stories, like the short ones that Maryanne, sometimes you get that rhythm right away and it's good. It's fairly good. And other ones, you're just working over every word.
Right.
So I wish there was an exact science, but there isn't.
A lot.
Marina.
You know, obviously a lot of your work skewers things, so I'm wondering, do you go into the story thinking, I want to skewer this particular thing?
Not really. Like, people say, oh, we like your humor. So when I try to just write a humor story, I fail.
Okay.
I have to have a plot and characters. And then
The
once they-
skewering comes.
yeah,
Okay.
when they're in motion, they're in an airport, they're flying,
Yeah.
then I think of the conflict that can happen.
Okay.
I can't, when I try to write just, oh, this will be a goofy, funny story,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work because
Yeah.
you really do need some anchoring
Right.
in a plot and something, and then you can inject it.
Okay.
And all the satire and stuff you're talking about, I think that comes in a little bit later.
Okay.
Usually write in the suspense genre, or like Delirium Corridor, the stories that you can.
I just try to write whatever I can get published.
But this one,
Except for
this one
romance, I
has.
can't write romance.
Obviously, it's in general fiction now.
Yes.
Did you?
The reason is because most of these stories were published in magazines, so there's a lot more literary fiction magazines. There are plenty of speculative fiction ones, but I've just gotten more literary fiction ones published, so it was easier to collect them.
Okay.
You're right, Delirium Corridor was all surreal and horror and stuff, but that was just two of my stories, and then a bunch of other stories like Shelley Lowenkoff and Angela Borda and many other writers.
Yeah.
So I could do a collection like that, but it's just sort of a matter of what people are interested in at the time. I try to have different stories here and there so that if someone says, oh, I don't really like this stuff, but do you have any of that? Then I'll be like, yeah. So that's my best answer for that.
All right. Are there any other questions?
Michael Robinson, bassist for my old band or future band.
Nice.
How much of a typical story is, let's say, inspired by personal experience versus just completely fabricated from your imagination?
That's good. Instead of just doing completely biographical, sometimes it'll just be some incident. Like I overheard people arguing in an airport, or I saw something at a checkout line at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, and I'll think, that's a good argument. I can use that. Because you don't want everyone agreeing in a story, you want some conflict. So if I see conflicts around me, I'll use that. And yeah, I think certain stories, there's stories in here about musicians and stuff, and that's certainly influenced by, if there's arguments between musicians, I feel like I've been in every argument possible. But in those cases, I try, like in this, there's a story in here, Freedom Rock, and it takes place in the early 70s. So I took myself completely out of it and just imagined other people, but I could still put arguments that I would recognize. I don't think there's a time setting on musician arguments. Everyone always tells the bassist to turn down. No, it's usually the drummer. This is one bassist I haven't had to tell to turn down, but there's certain age-old arguments with musicians. The drummer's speeding up, right? And it's the piano player is fooling around or hitting the wrong notes, so those kind of things.
I have one more question. Just
Sure.
Totally random. Do you have a favorite short story, just in general?
That's a tough one. I do like the Celestial Vagabonds one that's in here that I wrote about 3 jazz legends who meet up and record. It was just, it was a weird one for me to do, and it just worked out. It was kind of, after I read it, I thought it was a magic trick,
Yeah.
except I could never do it again. So it's like,
Interesting.
you perform something
Yeah.
that's wild, and then you're like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
And you're stuck. So anyway, I liked that one. There's other ones that are funny that I like just because I like the humorous ones, but that one I think is a good mixture.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks so much for everyone coming. It's great to see you, Brian.
Late, but here.
Hope you're writing.
Will.
Okay,
You
good.
inspired me.
And anyway, any other questions? I think we're good, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Michael, for making this so easy.